Good, great. You can all hear me. Yes, Anthony, thank you so much. I'm really, really happy to be here. UIC has been fantastic. I'm glad to see so many of my grad students here, and the faculty, students that I've engaged with so far over this semester have all been really, really fantastic, and I'm excited to move on to next semester. Next semester, I'll be teaching a seminar that I developed on a grad seminar on surveillance. So it'll be Surveillance After the Panopticon. Is the short title. Thinking of ways in which surveillance has changed since Foucault wrote about it in Discipline and Punish, and various ways in which the internet has changed and reconfigured the landscape and what it means to how identity is constituted today through surveillance apparatuses. I'm also teaching a class called Social Tech, in which we'll look at various technologies employed by artists, as well as business and designers, and how does technology intersect with developing new social forms or interacting with existing social forms. Looking at relational and socially engaged art, as well as design practices. So yes, that's a sort of short intro to what I'm going to be doing at UIC next semester. But yes, thank you again for introducing me, and thanks again to UIC and everybody here who's been so wonderful and welcoming. Okay, so my presentation. What I want to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about some things like the internet. Here's the internet. If you search for the internet in Google image search, this is a thing that's I think becoming common. I think it's called like a practice called quilting. Of using Google image search to illustrate a concept. I've seen a lot of people engage in this. But it often reveals very curious things. And in here we can see that the internet is mostly blue. And it has a lot, it's mostly illustrations. There's not a lot of, actually I don't see an actual photograph of anything resembling anything really. Is there? No. So photography, it's more illustration than photography. And I think that one of the things that's happening is we're now like entering a new. I mean, some people call it like the post-internet phase of art. There's also the phrase the Internet of Things is bandied around. And what does all this mean? I think there's one thing that I think it boils down to is there's a new internet. This internet that's much more enmeshed with the fabric of day-to-day life. And the more it develops, the less it becomes a sort of external fantastical realm. And becomes more and more tied into what we would like to call the actual. And I think that we're really only starting to try to come to terms with this new internet. It's this internet, the world as colonized by the internet. We don't really have a visual language yet, I think, for understanding this new hybrid, virtual, actual reality that we're finding ourselves confronted with. So. I'm interested in like the question of what does it mean to be critical of technology? Not like critical. We all know that critical doesn't mean not just like shutting something down, but a more positive criticality, like something like to be like attuned to the ideas, practices, processes that are not often questioned, and that most of us accept and unknowingly enact through our day-to-day behavior. But more fundamentally, I think it means to mine the subterranean, like often contentious stories that are embedded in everything. And that most of these stories end up being political. And I think that learning about these things often requires unlearning a whole suite of status quo truisms, as well as deliberate falsifications. So I wanted to say I saw Andrea Fraser's lecture recently, and it was really inspired by this question she asks. She asks in her practice, and she asked in her lecture, where she said, "What can we say about the person that this space, like the space of the museum in her case, what can we say about the person that this space is asking or expecting or pushing us to be? What sort of person does it project onto us?" And I think that I want to ask that question about technologies as well. And also like Henri Lefebvre asks a sort of similar question, like how do we produce space and how does space produce us? How do these things mutually constitute each other? And I think that this question is all the more relevant today in 2015 as we increasingly realize that virtual space and actual space are not quite as distinct as we might have thought they were. So then, like, the last question is, like, out of this comes, like, this question of how can we explore alternative relationships with information technologies? Because I think currently we only seem to see one, which derives directly from capitalism, which is basically the automation, and optimization of every aspect of life. The polite version of the story sees us delegating repetitive or burdensome tasks to machine helpers. But a more critical approach notices other things. The critic Evgeny Morozov notes that the automation of cognition, emotion, and intellect is the intolerable price we have to pay for the growing corporatization of everyday life. So I think technology today, this is Facebook. This is internet.org, where this is basically Facebook's project to bring internet access, or quote internet access, to places all over the globe that do not have it, through using high-altitude drones, they're powered by solar cells, broadcasting a sort of limited walled garden kind of internet to communities in Africa and South America, and places that are not connected yet. They see this huge new market of people that are not connected to the internet and are eagerly looking for marketing data on them. So the more we connect, the better it gets, as they say. And this just shows that I think technology today is really hard to separate from the neoliberal project, the project of, you know, the depoliticization of and optimization of every realm of life. In the most extreme libertarian fantasies, neoliberal fantasies, the state will no longer have any role in maintaining currency. You know, efforts to get rid of central banks are actually being talked about. So leaving absolutely no role for government whatsoever. So it's this drive that we often associate with technology to optimize, to individualize, and to depoliticize. This new politics, I think, of technology, there is one. It's disguised as apolitical or anti-political, or even, like, people want to say that it's a kind of transcendence of politics. But in the same way that the discipline of economics hides its political origins and values and ethics and effects behind this veil of mathematical objectivity. But unlike economics, technology and criticism is deeply political in every aspect of its theorization and application, I believe. So here's another example from the world of the overlap of technology and politics. This is Google Ideas, which is a think tank founded. It's headed by this guy Jared Cohen, who's like a Washington insider from in the foreign policy establishment, and they create tools against oppression. They are influencing. They have a tool that helps countries build constitutions. They're interested in the process of constitution building and using data and information and best practices to optimize constitution creation. So I mean, Google is very directly involved in these political circles, and it's only intensifying. But not only that, besides these sort of obvious political, like foreign policy kind of initiatives, Silicon Valley produces and manages the technologies that structure the majority of human communications today in the Western world. And pretty much without exception is pushing a variant of this neoliberal agenda in ways that we couldn't even imagine a decade ago. But the kicker for me is that there is no political opposition to this. There is a political opposition to neoliberalism, but the new sort of technical neoliberalism that Facebook and Google espouse, there's really no opposition that I'm aware of that I can see. There's no party, there's no platform, there's no slogans. And I don't even think there's a name for this alternative to what's known as the Californian ideology. So the resistance, I think the resistance takes some forms. It's often a romantic kind of resistance, right? I mean, we borrow really heavily from the language of romanticism, the visual language of romanticism, the ideas of romanticism. So like nostalgia for old media, refusals of technology, slow living, slow food, slow media. I mean, these are all like not necessarily problematic, and they're looking backwards in some ways, and not all of them look backwards. But there is a sort of sense that amongst some people that technology, is like destroying or perverting these cherished, more traditional, more authentic ways of life that we once had. And whenever I hear that, I like, wow, I hear people saying that are, ostensibly very critical people longing for some sort of past, and that always sets off alarm bells for me, because, the past can always be fairly rosy. But that's not to say that nothing troubling is going on. In fact, things that are going on are deeply troubling. I think the issue is that the critiques of technology can't often get far beyond nostalgic longing without extending the critique to capitalism. But I think another part of the problem is that we don't have enough off-the-shelf conceptual tools for understanding a world where things, machines, and people all share agencies. Or have agency of some kind, and where it's actually a sort of muddy and gray, ambiguous matter. We happen to be either these liberal, romantic masters of our own individualized emancipation, or we're cogs in a machine, only obeying these systems and being directed by new technologies. So I think Matthew Fuller writes in this book that just came out, Evil Media, writes about the value of using ambiguity and understanding the situation we're in now. He says, "The world today is one of scripts, of databases, of data structures and algorithms, a world of machines as much as one of texts or documents. Equivocal language includes not only the semantic richnesses of Shakespearean diction and the stutterphonics of Gertrude Stein, but also the aridity and obsessively repetitive ordering of assembly language and the fastidious deductive hierarchies of first-order predicate calculus. Likewise, the intentional action of an individual is only a limit case of a more general and dispersed array of forms of agency, of kinds that are always agonistic. Humans talking to machines, machines talking to humans, machines talking to machines, and so on. In such circumstances, ambiguity is more helpfully understood as something that arises not from conflicted or covertly oppositional intentions, but from the jarring and clashing, the mutating modulations of systems and mediations, in which problematic zones of indeterminacy arise because no system is ever truly closed." So this leads us to this next project. This is Matthew Fuller actually writes kind of extensively about this. And this will sort of wrap up my analysis of sort of this background of where I'm coming from. But Matthew Fuller writes about this project by artist Jakob Jakobsen called The Switch. And he describes it as illuminating some really, really important aspects of a critique of technology. And one of this project basically is this. I think he's a Danish artist, I believe, and he created this alteration where in this small community installed a switch on a street lamp, and that's the extent of his gesture. What he did was he looked at how the community reacted to this switch. And what sort of questions it prompted. And the idea that one could actually control the urban infrastructure that surrounds you is something that's not very commonly accepted or understood. Streetlights go on right when it gets dark out, and they go back off when it gets light out again. They all have this built-in sensor. In fact, you can't really buy a streetlight that doesn't have that. It's what Matthew Fuller calls a standard object. It's something that's been sort of layered into technology. It's something that's not really an option. It was decided long ago, and now nobody thinks about it anymore. And technology is filled with these standard objects, and we're always borrowing and importing old decisions that have been made long ago by in different political processes, without ever really thinking too deeply about what they are. And so what Jakob Jakobsen noticed about this project was that the community had very different ideas about what to do with this street lamp. Some would mention security, wanting to have it on all night. Others would mention economy and would say, well, we should turn it out after everybody goes home, and so we don't waste energy all night long. So there are a lot of different perspectives in this community, and they all sort of came out. The thing with this project is it was actually taken down, I think, days after the city really decided they hated it. And yeah, he sort of washed his hands of it. It was an experiment, but the point was that it wasn't actually, as Matthew Fuller talks about this, he says, what the switch achieves is this eruption of potential in a settled technology. By shifting the address of the street lighting system into a decision-making process that did not previously exist, it brought the possibility for such a process to come into being, or for several to clamor for access to the switch together. There is no inherent process of democratization in this othering of technology. What is released is something of an insight into the arrangement of the forces, the programs that make up the body of this system. It is on these grounds that the work makes a politics. So it's, the idea is that the switch functions, but its main significance lies beyond its effects, the ability of it to function for the community. It's rather in the contemplation and imagination that this function serves to prompt. So that will, that's that about the switch. I want to talk about this project of mine next. I'm moving on to my own work. This is, I'll talk about the Kuromoto model, or 1,000 Fireflies. This was a project that I responded to a call for proposals, or request for proposals for the Northern Spark Festival in 2012, which is, as they say, a free dusk to dawn participatory public art event throughout the city of Minneapolis. It featured 118 different artist projects in 28 venues across the city, and like 40,000 people showed up. It's kind of a Nuit Blanche style event for Minneapolis. And so they requested proposals. They had a small budget. I wanted to create something fairly large and citywide that was adapted and socially engaged, that adapted to the community and the streets of Minneapolis. So after a bunch of revisions, I came up with an idea, which was I would create these. These are a series of, this is a collection of them on my floor. These are bike lights that they blink on and off. You can't see that because it's not video. I'll show you some video in a sec. But they synchronize with each other using radio communications and insights from complex system science that looks at the science or the possibilities of synchronization or emergent behavior in complex systems. So using simple rules about listening, like for example, when each one of them blinks, it also broadcasts a short radio pulse. And they're always listening to each other. So once it broadcasts a pulse, it also listens for the others, and it knows when the others are blinking. So it slowly adjusts its own blink cycle to try to accommodate that. And out of this, a consensus kind of emerges, and these lights begin blinking in unison without any kind of centralized organizational authority. There's no like master blinking bulb. And this is a phenomenon that's been studied in nature. There's a species of firefly in Southeast Asia that actually do this. They basically use a very similar algorithm that's baked into their bodies. But they achieve this state of leaderless synchronization. So the idea was that we would distribute these lights in Minneapolis on the night of the festival because Minneapolis is a huge bicycling city. It's really popular to bicycle everywhere, even in the harsh winters there. And the festival itself is the lifeblood of the festival in a way, is bicycles, because it's spread out across the whole city, and to get from place to place, you pretty much have to bike. So the bicycles are part of the sort of infrastructure of the art event in the first place. And I wanted also to, working with cyclists was great because it was also like an existing community that would readily accept something like this. And there's a precedent for this form of organization already in the critical mass rides that happen, which essentially are self-organized rides. There's a sort of a core organizing group, but there's no real organizational hierarchy. And a lot of the way that the rides happen is through negotiation and consensus that arises out of sort of very non-strict and non-hierarchical processes. And the last, I wanted to create this new experience of participating in a system where like the rules of social proximity could be momentarily transformed. So going closer or farther from someone would result in some sort of effect that would be legible in some way. So I have this, this is gonna work. All right. This is a simulation that I developed as a part of the proof of concept. You can see what they all start out going randomly. All of them are blinking totally independently and randomly. But over time, you start to notice patterns that emerge. And gradually, this actually happens a bit faster with the actual bike lights themselves. But they achieve this state of synchronization. And so this pattern would sweep kind of across the crowd of people. So I thought a lot about this idea of self-organization and what it means, and this idea of like self-organization and it goes along in some way with the social systems that bicycles produce and are produced by. This idea that, I mean, the system that produces and sustains cars is much more hierarchical and centralized, and less, much more hierarchical and centralized than that which produces and operates bicycles. You know, bicycles don't require oil companies or massive city infrastructure projects as much as cars do. Although of course, oil goes into bicycles in some ways. Okay. That's ended. So I built a little prototype, and here's the example of how that works. There's these two little lights that synchronize. This is like a much slower version, but these use radio chips, and there's two separate chips, and they're each communicating with each other, and they synchronized. That was great. I ran through, I'm gonna go through this a little bit more quickly, but I ran through a prototype run where I created a bunch of prototype units, created proof of concept, it sort of worked, had a number of problems that I ended up fixing. I'll just skip through that. I raised some money on Kickstarter for it, which was fantastic. Northern Spark provided most of the funds, but Kickstarter provided another also way of distributing the lights to people. Order a lot of radio chips. This is what 1,000 LEDs looks like. So I built 1,000 of them. And so I got a bunch of friends to come over and put things together. Here's my friend Joe assembling some electronics. Sanghua. And then I read it more and more. There's Phil. Thank you much, Phil. There's me baking some chips. And after a long time, we got rid of all the LEDs finally and made a bunch of them. And here's what they look like blinking on the ground. So they all achieve the state pretty quickly. It doesn't take a very long time for them to actually synchronize. So created posters, put them around the city. Everybody gathered the night of the festival in a park that was right by the Stone Arch Bridge, this historic bridge that crosses the Mississippi in Minneapolis. And people rode across the bridge. And there was no planned ride. I sort of wanted people instead to completely disperse into the city and not be a sort of even an organized event to see basically what would happen. So lots of people gathered. And something actually funny and spontaneous happened, which was the mayor showed up, and he's riding one of the city bikes. It's kind of like divvy bikes. He actually ended up leading the ride across the bridge, only to have it end and people disperse. So it wasn't totally self-organizing, totally completely adapted to an existing hierarchical system. Which I think maybe points out one of those problems with the rhetoric of self-organizing systems and self-stabilizing things, which essentially, in some way, like looks. It doesn't solve problems in the world, right? It's not meant to fix things. It's not meant to, libertarianism, relaxing restrictions to let the magic of the marketplace, happen is not going to. It's not really going to save us. There are problems that we need, other things to deal with. But I think that the point, though, that I think that I'm interested in relating to self-organizing systems is really to just call attention to their legibility and not to, or to make them legible in some way, and to show how technology can embody things that a way of looking at social interaction that's not mediated through technology directly, that augments social interaction. It doesn't insert itself into a middle and commandeer everything about communication. So here's a short video that just sort of shows. This is produced by Northern Spark. So we go this way. So it's kind of jam-packed with people. And it was a great event. So yeah. I want to wrap that up and talk about another project called Shenanigans. This is something I developed last year, and I'm continuing to develop. It is named after a top secret, or formerly top secret, joint CIA NSA effort that was revealed by Edward Snowden, which involved outfitting drones with sensitive electronic listening equipment and flying them over Yemen, and collecting essentially maps of people's Wi-Fi signatures, maps of Wi-Fi hotspots, also maps of smartphones that use Wi-Fi. And unbeknownst to most people, I think more people are learning about this. There are a suite of Wi-Fi tracking systems, not just these drones, but that exist all around. This is an example from the UK of a garbage can manufacturer, who put these tracking systems into their cans and distributed them on the streets of London. The idea is that your phone is always broadcasting out a unique identifier, and it's trying to search for available hotspots, but it leaks information about who you are, essentially. It leaks the names of hotspots you've connected to in the past, and it leaks a unique identifier string that uniquely identifies you. So this project, I decided that I wanted to combat this in some way, to think about how to build a system that would interact with these systems. And so the idea I came up with, this is an installation at Lodge, where there's a display on the wall that requests that you join a Wi-Fi hotspot called Shenanigans. And when you do, it will prompt you to give consent to distribute your identity worldwide. And if you do, it will print out on that laser printer a certificate of de-identification. Here, I have an example right there. And that includes your unique fingerprint, your phone's MAC address, as well as a list of Wi-Fi hotspots your phone is looking for. And what it does, so how does it de-identify you by giving up your information? So the answer is this portable device. This is a fairly cheap, like $25 battery-powered portable Wi-Fi computer that you can put in your pocket and carry around with you. You can program these to include a list of all the people who have submitted their identities. And it will basically rebroadcast those as if that huge group of people were all in your pocket. So one person can walk around a city and fake the presences, the signatures of everybody who's submitted their identity to the system in the past, a kind of like I am Spartacus kind of model of combating a surveillance system. I think that I won't say too much more about this project. It's still in development and there's more to come, but I think one way I'm interested in beyond something that simply is this counter-surveillance design project is that I think that it takes this present desire a lot of us have to sort of be everywhere at once, and then harness it to a mechanism that's actually undermining some of those systems that are prompting that desire. So the last, this is like the third in a series of these socially engaged projects that I've been working on. The last is Gary Streetlights. And this is something that's just in its early stages, but I wanted to talk about it because it's something that's out there, and it's also a more community-based project, and we're really interested in getting people's feedback and input on like how this works. Marissa, the lovely Marissa Lee Benedict, over here is collaborating with me on this project. We've collaborated on several other projects, but we're working on this one together. And the idea is to take Washington Park. This is a park in Gary, Indiana. The Gary Parks in the city of Gary is really interested in bringing artists to Gary, and a group of artists, including Jan Tichy and once some other people, a large list of other people who is probably too long to name here, have been engaged in creating workshops in the city of Gary and making art in various ways. So this is a proposal that we've put together where we seek to work with a space of these parks, some of these parks, specifically Washington Park, And this is a sketch that Marissa made of a few interventions that we would perhaps do. The idea is to build our own street lamps, taking as inspiration Jakob Jakobsen's project, where the politics of the streetlight is questioned through an alteration in the space, and to create sculptural objects that are not only interact with their environment in creative and diverse ways, but also that are controllable by people. And they're also built by people who live in the communities that the infrastructure serves. So the idea is to create workshops that will give residents the tools they need to be able to build and program these lights. So the interesting thing about these lights is they're not simply like on-off lights. They are lights that are capable of producing any color. They're colored RGB LED lights, which means that they can display any color that you can think of. And not only that, but they can blink, they can fade, they can do anything that you can program to do. They can synchronize with music. The limit really is your imagination. The hope is that we would capture the imagination of people who live in these in nearby a park, in the immediate area of stakeholders. We're hoping to create something that lasts a bit longer than Jakob Jakobsen's intervention. That also creates a more sort of sustained engagement with thinking about what it means to be in control of infrastructure. And it comes at a time when cities are sort of being revamped or remodeled with this idea of the smart city. This idea is being developed, which puts sensors everywhere, and often is used to optimize or create a more efficient city organization. And it's usually implemented from the point of view of city administrators. But I'm really interested in this question of what are the technopolitics of the underserved and the underrepresented? And how could politically aware smart technology or smart infrastructure distribute civic authority more equitably? And so these are the questions that I want to ask about through this project. So it's still in its infancy, and we're still developing what to do with it. But yeah, that's about it for that. So here's we talked briefly about this. This is Phil and I at the Acre Residency. This is a show we developed where we created a barbed wire fence telephone system where we were able to speak to each other over the barbed wire fences. This was a very popular practice around the turn of the century in Montana, the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, where the state was left out of telecoms networks, and a sort of grassroots effort to build telecom infrastructure came up and used barbed wire fences as the transmission lines for a network of phones. So it actually works. You can pick up these phones and talk with each other. So we put it in a gallery, and it's actually, the barbed wire becomes pretty, it's kind of dangerous stuff. It's not fun to work with. And you actually have to be really careful around it, because if you'll snag your clothes on it, it will cut you. And so the presence becomes much, it's kind of this homey appearance in a photograph, but in reality, and in actuality, it feels very much, it feels a bit imposing. There's another still. Okay, that's about that for that project. I want to talk about this other project. This is the last, this is no longer the socially engaged section. I have a few other projects that are video-based that are not socially engaged. Dark Fiber was a collaboration between Marissa and I. And we initially installed it at the Chicago Artists Coalition. And here's a shot of part of the installation. It's a video / sculpture. And I was just going to show you some pictures of the sculpture, and then I'm going to play the video for you. I'm not going to describe too much of what it is, but I'll give you a sense of what's happening here. So there's this is from Contemporary Art Brussels, where we also installed this work, and you can see this cable. So then if there's a video component, which I will now play. Again. gosh. And there. No. I think something went wrong. Stand by. Oh no. Okay, that's actually pretty much the end. Maybe I'll just end it there because that's basically if you want to really know what happens in the end, the door closes and I leave. But that's it. So that's that's the end of the piece. So. So I mean, here's a quote. This is something that inspired us thinking about this this piece. This is actually the translator's notes on the translation and acknowledgments for 1,000 Plateaus. The translator notes that the use of draw in the 1,000 Plateaus is an act of creation. What is drawn, the body without organs, the plane of consistency, a line of flight, does not pre-exist the act of drawing. The French word tracer captures this better. It has all the graphic connotations of to draw in English, but can also mean to blaze a trail or open a road. To trace, de calquer, on the other hand, is to copy something from a model. So we have, this is a kind of also another illustration that we created for the text that accompanied the piece, which was a kind of a link node diagram of the concepts that we were thinking about in relation to this work, and thinking about networks and how one navigates networks. What are the aesthetics of network representation? What are alternate approaches? What is revealed, what is hidden by this conventional form of network representation, the link node diagram, where things are connected through blobs, often commonly referred to as a hairball. But so just a bit about like the term, the text that we gave just defined the term a little bit, the title dark fiber, which is telecommunications industry jargon for unused or unlit fiber optic cable. It's very cheap for them to add a few extra strands of wire to an existing fiber rollout. So they basically dig open a trench, and then they might as well add 6 or 7 more while it's open. So they overbuild capacity all the time. So all of our streets have unused fiber optic cable beneath them. But increasingly, the telecom companies have been selling off or leasing this dark fiber to companies, large companies typically. It's very expensive, but you can basically build your own internet as a large company, where you use the existing fiber that's laid beneath the city streets and between cities, and lease it to create your own parallel network that's completely physically separate from the internet, even though it's running alongside it in some way. Dark fiber also refers to these strands that are off of the internet. They're dark, but they're not actually dark there, but they're dark to us. These strands that operate, they're alongside, but kind of in the shadows of the public internet. I think the other interest we had was that the sites and the materials and the acts of telecommunications infrastructure is not really illuminated outside of very narrow circles of YouTube videos where you learn how to lay fiber optic cable. If you do the Google image search for internet infrastructure, you get very little. You actually get basically the same as the internet. You get all these diagrams. You don't get pictures of fiber optic cable or of the crazy ships that carry it across the ocean or any of these things. We actually, Marissa and I just learned, in fact, that the act of emerging from the water carrying a fiber optic cable slung over your back is actually pretty much close to reality. This exists. A guy puts on a wetsuit, swims off of a boat carrying a cable that it swims to shore, and they pull it across. They tie the rope to the fiber optic cable, and a machine winches it onto the shore. And then they bury it into a manhole in the sand and then cover it up on the beach. So we completely made it up, but it's actually how they do it. So anyway, I just want to briefly get on to the, before we move on, we reinstalled this at Expo, and we want to change it everywhere we go to incorporate the ending, which incorporates the surroundings. There's a important part about a curated film festival that we've added to these two of these shows that I probably don't have too much time to talk about, but we created a new booth. Here's Rochelle Brown's piece that aired during our film festival. We interrupted the regular screening of this every hour to show work from a CAC artist, a video-based work. And we created this massive shed. Here's a picture of it, a telecom equipment shed to install at Expo for our screening room. Here's another picture. Okay. Up here. Okay, so I want to show this project, Circuit. I've been working on this for a while. It's one of those projects that kind of keeps evolving. But it's based on, I was inspired by this proposal by Robert Smithson to create several spiral jetty-like things within the site of this Bingham Canyon copper mine, which is the largest man-made pit in the world, or one of the largest. And it's been operational for more than 100 years. Putting out lots and lots of copper. I learned about the site and got really interested. I'll just sort of skip through some of this, but here's a shot just to give you a sense of the scale. See these giant earth-moving trucks kind of dwarf an SUV. Here's a picture of it from the air. It produces like, I think 13% of the copper that is consumed in the US. And so like, it also, the mine like churns out all this propaganda material. Like there's like all these educational films about the mine, and I guess you can't visit it anymore. The viewing platform was demolished in a landslide. But I was really interested in the site because it's only 13 miles away from the Utah Data Center, which is the NSA's, the National Security Agency's brand new data center built several years back in the town of Bluffdale, Utah. It's all called the Community Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative Data Center, but otherwise known as Utah Data Center. Bluffdale, yes, the city of Bluffdale. Here's some architectural sketches of the brand new data center. Plans, blah, blah, blah. So the data center is basically, like it was designed, it's speculated to, as part of the NSA's effort to collect the bulk of US and world internet communications, and to be a massive storage warehouse for encrypted communications, stored for whoever knows long until they can be decrypted by future technology. So they might not know what we're saying now if it's encrypted sufficiently, but they will know eventually. So they're storing vast amounts of data here. They're data mining. So I thought like this idea of mining is really interesting. These two sites are so close together, and they're both engaged in some kind of mining. But I think like in a more poetic sense, they're sort of, these sites are kind of enantiomorphs, as Smithson would say. Like they're mirror images where the mine, the copper mine is casting off all kinds of material into the world, and the data center is bringing it back in the form of virtual information. And so they're paired very well along this like virtual, actual access, material and virtual. And so there's let's see if I can show you this. So the distance between them, as I say, is like 13 miles. It's an interesting distance because it's actually maybe more like 20 if it's not as the crow flies. But you can see here's a map, and it shows this possible route between the two. So the idea I had was to connect them somehow, and I wanted to actually connect them using myself. And so the strategy I came up with, let's see, I'll skip through some of these. Oops. This is another thing I'll talk about in a second. But this, which was on the screen earlier, I will show you an animation that I did. This is something that I'm working on now, so it's kind of in flux. I did a test visit out to Utah to record some footage for this. What you're looking at, what you will be looking at, is LiDAR data, like a laser scan of the entire region between the mine and the data center. That's animated by a walk that I took through the site, and audio recorded from in-ear microphones, binaural microphones. So. Adjust this right. Is he synchronizing the audio?
1, 2, 3.
That's it. I'm going to leave this running, but I don't have time for the last project, but that'll be it. So, thanks. Yeah, sorry, I went through it really quickly, but this is what we're looking at is LiDAR data that came from an aerial scan of the terrain. So each of those points represents a return of a laser beam that returned to the aircraft that scanned the territory with. And so what I'm doing here is I've taken this data and I've created an animated camera path, a virtual camera path using my body, walking through the terrain. So I actually mounted a camera on my head and would look around, and that's sort of what you see. So the intent of the project is to walk the complete distance between the 2 points and to complete this day-long walk and record it and play it as a loop. So it'd be a sort of day-long video piece. Yeah.
Did you download that map on your computer and navigate it based on the GPS record of your actual?
Exactly, yeah. So I wrote an app that will record the GPS position of the phone as well as the orientation, so where you're looking at it. So instead of recording video data, you're recording a sort of a virtual camera position.
2, 3.
So it's similar to the way that virtual reality goggles will perceive your movement in the world. The idea is that it's not virtual reality. It's coming from one experience that happened at some point in the past. My trip between these 2 sites. Yeah, no, I have it. So it'll start at the NSA site and end here. So I have sections of that walk too. This is just a sort of this is in progress, so those aren't ready yet to show. But I haven't done the walk yet, and when I do, it'll be there. So. The state of Utah. Yeah. Yeah.
Really interesting talk. Could you explain a bit more of your process and the timeline of getting like the bikes out with the bikes and that first project?
Yeah. So the timeline was like a total of 3 months from start to finish. I'd never made electronics before, and so it was kind of a crash course in like figuring out how to go from like amateur to like manufacturer of a small batch of electronic devices. So it was challenging, but yeah, it was a project that I had a lot of help with from SAIC and from a lot of other talented people, and so yeah, it happened on time and it worked.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Do you mind, what else would you like me to describe about it?
Just the timeline of how long it took to get that going.
Yeah, so it was, I had to order parts and wait for probably about a month. Manufacturing took another month, or a month or 2 months, I guess. So yeah, there was a small design phase of going through the design iterations, but that was really rushed because everything had to happen. Like it was really hard to plan out this whole timeline of when things had to be available, and logistics of everything was not fun. Yeah, but it was definitely doable. That's part of the interesting thing about the project is that it's totally within the reach of amateurs to be able to. I have programming experience, so I was able to do that, but that didn't really help me for any of the other stuff that I was prepared to do, like to design circuit boards and to learn how to put them all together and that kind of thing. So.
Was that part of Chicago critical mass, or intended to be?
No, it never. No, I needed a budget for it. It's like this was funded by Northern Spark really generously, and so to give them away free, which I think is really an important part of the project, it has to be funded, so somebody has to pay for it. And the cost per unit is around $7, so like 1,000 of them is like 7,000. So I'm not gonna just go make a bunch myself. So yeah.
I'm curious if you could. This is more of like a broad question.
Yeah.
About maybe the way you think about something in relation to your practice. Because it's on my mind as well. But what the politics are that get exuded by proximity, the role proximity plays with respect to technology, the body and space.
Yeah. There's distance is an important part, I think, of a lot of this, and I think that what I like to try to locate like large systems in some way in an experience that is in some way embodied. There's a sort of to make things larger things legible, like at the scale of like human felt experience. Is that sort of good? What you're saying is, there's like in the Bike Lights project, like in the Kuromoto model, there's proximity is a huge part of it. It's about it controls the synchronization. The project is about proximity. It's about like groups coming together, and in a way, it's this visualization of proximity. Like one night, the night of the project, like it was like 5 a.m. I was biking around the city, and I encountered a person who was biking like on the opposite side of the street, and this person smiled at me, and I didn't know what was going on, and then I realized that like we both had lights and they had like synchronized, and they'd noticed it. I didn't notice it at all, and I'd totally forgotten that I had one on, and so it did definitely like transform like the way that like encounter and proximity worked in this at the level of walking or biking through a city.
So like with the lights, the synchronization happens depending on proximity.
Yeah.
So like the further away people are, the more asynchronous.
Yeah. Yeah, they fall out of sync very fast if you're far away, because they're really cheap little microcontrollers and they don't have accurate clocks. So like within a couple seconds or maybe 30 seconds, they'll be totally blinking out of sync. So you have to have sustained proximity to have them synchronized.
So there's a point at which the light would just function as a light.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's only activated when it's in groups of other similar like members like it.
Because of the speed the radio wave travels through air?
It's fast. No, it's just they're out of range. The radio signal won't be strong enough to be received by a faraway unit. So the range would be maybe,
Received.
yeah,
It's not received out of time, it's just not received.
exactly, yeah.
So then is the default mode off or on once it exits range?
It's always blinking. It's just not in sync with anything else. So the only change that happens is that its rhythm is slowly adjusted. Yeah.
I saw your wire piece at Expo Chicago, and that was just super cool. So it was really nice getting context for how it was made here. I didn't catch if you said you left it there, and then if so, what's the relevance of it being left there, and how big was your team of people that you worked with? Or was that just?
We did not leave it there. We designed it all to be packed up, and it bolts together. It comes apart. It's kind of like a giant piece of IKEA furniture. We made these structurally insulated wall panels that are fairly light to lift. They're not great. We kind of busted our backs doing it, but we had some help from some really amazing people to carry things and put things together. And yeah, it's now leaning up against a wall somewhere in a studio. Yeah, we still have it. We want to take it somewhere. We're really curious about the possibility of leaving it somewhere, putting it out somewhere to sort of blend into plain sight. We call it, there's a text on it that says CIRA, and it stands for Contestational Infrastructure Research Annex. So we're thinking about exploring the meaning of that term and thinking about what contestational infrastructure means and how to, what sort of sites or locations it could live in that would extend the project in some way, or perhaps create a new project.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So I am a programmer. I was before teaching and before going to graduate school. I worked for 10 years writing software. So I have a long engagement with writing code and making projects involving technology. But my relationship, I mean, I'm pretty. I think I want to be as critical as I can be. I think, and it's difficult to be so critical. Because it's difficult to be critical of anything, and you have to work really hard at it. My position about it, I mean, I'm really skeptical about any possibility there, about human liberation or anything like that lies within technology. I'm very skeptical of the claims by cyber utopianists like the California ideologues that really see better living through technology, through information technology. I don't know. I feel like there aren't very many ways to mitigate the risks that are so prevalent of oversharing of information, of totalitarian control through access to lots and lots of information on people, the asymmetries that are sort of bound up with who owns what pieces of infrastructure, the kind of the merger of capitalism and culture that's happening with technology is just really kind of alarming in many ways, I think. But I think that, I don't know, my position with prognosis, I feel like there's something interesting about like the Internet of Things that was said recently by Tim O'Reilly, who's like one of the leading proponents of solving the world's problems through technology. He said that so like that while advertising was the sort of native business model for the earlier version of the internet we know now, the native business model of the Internet of Things will be insurance. And that the insurance industry is going to be gobbling up data at alarming rates using sensors that are installed in virtually everything. Fitbits, they're already being used, they're being tied to health insurance premiums. So you can get a discount on your health insurance rate by wearing a Fitbit and sending them data about it to prove that you're exercising as you should be. Car companies use monitoring devices, car insurance companies use monitoring devices to measure how hard you brake and how fast you drive and where you go. So all those things are tied to insurance rates. So there's a vast incentive for them to gather as much information as they can. And the big data, epistemology of big data is this idea of there's never enough. Truth can be discovered through more data. There's this sort of voracious and endless appetite for more information about everyone that is very akin to the sort of voracious appetite for accumulation of wealth. And so we're seeing this parallel, appetite for accumulation of data, consumption of data, that I think is only accelerating and will only accelerate as more and more becomes available through the Internet of Things. So I'm really skeptical about that. I want to look for ways that we can reinsert human agencies into this process of communications, where you have a device that's connecting to of your own. It's not really your own because you don't program it, you don't control it. But that's connecting to and communicating with another device somewhere else, and you don't really have a say in this relationship. So I think that inserting some form of human agency into this as a mediating factor somehow is important, and maybe it can be protected by law, but I think that's the only way that will actually be inserted into there. Like have a bill of rights of some kind for access to technologies, for control over one's bodily technologies we wear, technologies we use on a daily basis. There are some small legal protections that are coming out now, like we recently re-won the right to jailbreak iPhones. Every year the Copyright Office revisits the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. We need an act that actually creates a way to ensure that we have access to and control over information that concerns us. And there's all sorts of thorny issues with that, but I don't know. I think it's it could be a political solution. I don't know. Yeah.
Do you imagine a reactionary turn at some point when we stop being so enamored with our own data? Because as individuals, eventually
Yeah, I mean, right now it's so popular, right, with the quantified self movement. Like, people want so much information about they can track their own health. They can supposedly glean some sort of truth about what, who they are and what they do through looking at data. Is that a fad? I don't know. I feel like the number of data gathering techniques is multiplying. And it creates this problem where you have too much information to sort through, and how do you find the noise or the signal within the noise? But the answer to that, I think, is coming, and it's kind of disconcerting. It's artificial intelligences. It's algorithms that process the data, that read these things, and then give us results, simplified results, so that we don't have to parse the data. It's like the airport scanners that the TSA uses. When you walk through them now, they don't show, nobody looks at your naked body anymore. It's all done by a computer that's looking at the data, and it uses artificial intelligence to show them on the screen where potential threat items may be located. I don't know why, but it always the back of my knee. They always trigger it on. I don't know what's going on with my knee, but it's really weird. But yeah, these artificial intelligences are going to be consuming data much more frequently. Facebook tagging images, Google tags images. Google has image recognition algorithms that it unleashes on every image you upload to Google, and it will categorize them for you. It'll even send you, send me this nice little recap video of my Saturday night in Utah when I went out here. We complete with dance music and these photos of my trip that I had taken. And it just emailed it to me. It was really wonderful. So considerate. Well, I just uploaded I took a bunch of pictures on a Saturday night, and so it was Saturday night in Utah. That's what I called it.
Can I ask you a question? Maybe it's kind of a big fatty, but maybe you can get your head around it. A question about for you in thinking about all of this, what is art's role?
Yeah.
What
is art's role? That's great. I mean, I think it's to explore the ambiguities of this new world that we're in. I don't think that there are clear-cut answers to a lot of things. I don't think there are clear-cut answers to who we are and how we interact with machines and machine intelligences. How do we conceptualize ourselves as individuals within this field? I think these are questions that I think art can address. I don't think that. I don't want to supply answers. I don't think that it should be telling us what to do or preaching propaganda in any way. But I do feel that there are some sort of fundamental questions about what constitutes agency or action in a political world that need to be addressed. I don't think that traditional activism. I think there's still a place for it, but I think that it's in a crisis of some kind. I don't think that it can really cope with with this, with the challenges posed by this new political arrangement that we're finding ourselves in. You can't just go out and protest this, really. I mean, there's a lot of other issues that it may work for. You can.
Very much controlled.
Yeah. No, you can, of course. I think that the efficacy is maybe questionable too. I like to think of ways like, what is important to look at? What is important to consider? Like, how do we conceive of ourselves as actors in these systems? I think those questions are all really relevant, and we need to look to. I think there's a lot of art that's addressing these questions, thinking about like who we are.
Maybe not to collapse that too much, but then would it be fair to interpret like your stance in relation to Beata's question as like exposure? Like you're interested in exposure?
I think.
Relationships of information.
Not so much. I think that I am at some level, right? Because I'm interested in talking about like these issues and talking about the data center and like talking about like the issue of exposing the issue of Wi-Fi tracking, But I want to go beyond that because I don't think that that's a really effective method or particularly it's not really an interesting way of looking at the world. I don't think it's like because people have heard about these things and it's like, well, okay, so yeah, that exists, and we're all exposed to so much. So about things like mass surveillance, things like Wi-Fi tracking systems. I think we're exposed to a lot of information about that we don't. I don't think the role, I don't see my role as wanting to, tell everybody about it, right? I mean, I think that might be partially important, but I think that there's more important things to happen than just announcing that this stuff is going on. I think that it's more in trying to interpret it and trying to look more critically at some of the issues that some of these systems pose about how we relate to technology. Not necessarily that they exist, but why they exist,
Do you ever have to, do you ever take a time out and totally disconnect? I mean, can it go, do you need that in the work that you're doing? Do you willfully say, okay, over? Or is that
One,
possible?
2, 3.
Off. Do you turn this off? Yeah.
No, I need to. I really need to. But yeah, that's going to be happening soon, I think. Otherwise, I'm going to probably break. So
I didn't mean it to be that. I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't mean it to be that. I would imagine, because what you've described tonight is largely out of my range, and I kept thinking about the fact that possibly mixing paint is a kind of protection, rather that can't be tracked. And so what you've offered me tonight is making me very conscious of what parts of my life can't be tracked and what choices I'm making that I'm just giving myself over to being trapped. And I certainly know that. But to decide to practice in that range is that's intense. You've described a very intense engagement with something that I'm passive. I give myself over passively, reluctantly.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I like the thought of painting as something that's untracked.
I hadn't thought about it.
I mean, it's a truism. It's an unfortunate truism that that surveillance is like a standard feature of new media art or like new media work. I mean, it's built into the medium itself for everything that is done about relating to its consumption to be tracked. Which is not true of any previous form of media, communication media. I mean, there are very limited opportunities or possibilities for tracking TV usage. There was the Nielsen company had to go to great lengths to do that. It was all sampling and statistics, but now it's like there's such detailed information about exactly how long you hover your mouse pointer over a Facebook picture. Like that's all recorded and used to generate more results for you. The fact is, like, who's watching it? Maybe nobody. But it is something that you think about. It's something that students think of. Like my students, my freshmen in classes that I teach are very, they're very aware of growing up in a world like this, and they deal with it every day. They don't actually turn off. Nobody wants to disconnect from this world because it's visibility. It's like survival. You want to be seen. You don't want to disappear.
But you don't have the right to disappear in this country, right?
No.
It's the right in
But-
Germany, for example.
Yeah, but so many people don't want to. That's like the worst. The last thing they would want to do is to disappear. They don't want overexposure, but
I know.
disappearance is almost scarier.
And it's so scary to me to think about, that I'm not able to, erase my traces.
Yeah.
But I think I also want to say, I'm wondering, I think we know so much about surveillance, heard so much about it, but I think we still are not able to understand the essence of technology. And I think it's so important to talk about these circumstances and, as you said, what it does, and I think it's, I'm fascinated by the small little title,
One,
open
two,
control,
three.
so it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Up there.
Mhm. Yeah.
You mentioned at one point the value of ambiguity,
Mhm.
and I keep thinking about that and about sort of this idea of the signal, like who's sending out the signal, but also who's receiving it, and this idea that we're being tracked, but then you're also tracking yourself within that infrastructure of signals, and like a more specific question I have is the project that where you sort of collect the identities in people's phones.
Mhm.
I mean, is that in a way sort of the de-identification of the self then becomes a sort of safety network?
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
where does the I don't know, just sort of that like conflation of self and identity.
Yeah. No. There's this conflation. Like self. You mean like a bodily self?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I think, identity is something that's often, it's assigned by a system, like a system of authority, to individualize and to discipline and to, constitute people as subjects before some kind of regime. It can be a lot of things. Identity can mean that's one definition of identity. But the ways in which you are identified by these systems, is in a large part to track you. And so thinking about your phone's identity is something that's assigned to it by, it's stamped on it when it's manufactured, and it's just happily broadcasting it out. But then the possibility of changing it exists. You can actually change it. But not only that, but you can duplicate it, and you can allow other people to possess that identity. So the identity of your phone can become very fluid, whereas our own sort of, we don't get other extra fingerprints, and we don't get to change drastically our appearance, although there are some interesting counter-surveillance efforts that involve changing appearances. But in a way, trying to make identity something that's more flexible and using ways of shaping identity as ways to evade surveillance and control. Ways of taking control over the identity that you project or the display to the outside world. There's some really great projects about that. Like CV Dazzle, which is a makeup lookbook that lets you fool face recognition algorithms, and so on. But, yeah.
There's something really interesting about maybe what you've been saying and what Julia brought up about what's getting tracked and the way that the conversation is revealing, at least to me, this isn't really a question more than just a comment, but that we've moved from talking about, bless you, from talking about the it that gets tracked to the we and the way in which it keeps pulling me
Yeah,
that I
they're
find really kind of horrific.
they're a science to us, right? I mean, and so I'm thinking, I mean, like there's I think there's a response which is to maybe take a bit of ownership over those, to think of ways in which. So Marissa and I are also collaborating on this a project that looks at various ways of creating bodies. How can we create new bodies that are actors in some way? How can we create new bodies that have some form of identity, like a body, thinking about the form of a corporation, right? Which is a body. Corporations are people, according to our Supreme Court. And so, can we incorporate in ways that are not related directly to the capitalist economy? Can we incorporate critically? So thinking about various strategies for creating bodies that are our own, that are not like put on us by some external horrific process.
But yeah, totally. I'm really interested in that. The weird thing that happens though is like when it becomes unconscious, the appropriation of the we becomes comforting, even though it's being projected onto us. And so anyway. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I have another question. What do you think the role of this sort of art and this sort of technology is going to be in developing countries? I suppose bouncing off what she was talking about Germany earlier, where I think you can see in the US and in developed countries, it's super important and it's very successful.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want your opinion on
Like what's going to happen?
Yeah, what role is that going to play?
Like art or yeah. That's a great question. I haven't really gotten involved in that at all. And there are efforts that people are doing that kind of work. There's some interesting projects, but I don't actually have too much expertise in that. Something I'd love to do though. Because it's such an interesting space, because it's also like this contested space. You have Facebook and Google getting really interested and getting involved, and so like how do we respond? How do I respond? How do people in those countries respond? How do media artists in general respond to those questions? Like it's so new that it's it's just happening, that people are just starting to come to terms with it. So, but I think there are people engaging it. I don't know. I can't rattle off a list of those things right now, but. That's
Shall
it.
we let him go?
Thanks.